Tech Revision with Mrs. Swanee Pooh. Hi everyone, this video is going to focus on socio-economic influences. So this is a little bit of a history lesson about how things in the world, events, major events and trends and technology improvements have had a big impact on the world of product design. So we're going to go through it right from kind of World War One through World War Two and up to kind of like modern times. So let's get started. So firstly, what do we actually mean by socio-economics? So this is the understanding of how society and the economy, so money, and people, how they interact together. So by having an understanding of this, it means designers can recognize the opportunities that exist for them to design and make new products. So there could be an opportunity based on what's happening in the world, or a new fashion trend or a big world event could mean an opportunity for someone to design and market something new that could be very successful at that time. So there's some modern examples, things like furniture stores selling budget furniture to cater for the changing needs of the population. So IKEA are quite a good example of taking advantage of socio-economic sort of changes. And also there are quite a lot of things that happen with like demographic trends. So nowadays couples start families a little bit later in life. We have a rapidly aging population. So by 2040, 19% of the population are going to be over 65 years old, meaning that they are going to need lots of different types of products, and this is a little bit of an advantage for designers to get on board with this, because they'd be able to design products that appeal or are inclusive of people of that sort of age range. More young people going to university, so there are lots of kind of demographic trends. People tend to get married a little bit later than they used to, so things are a little bit different nowadays, and it's all about designers realizing those changes and being able to react to them and design products that meet those needs. So if we go back, the first bit we're going to have a look at, you might want to make some notes as we kind of go through this, is just after the First World War. We're going to talk a little bit about the Bauhaus and the development of furniture for mass production. This is where it all sort of started. So the Bauhaus was a design school based in Germany. If you've watched the Design Movements video, you will know a little bit about what they believed in. So it was all about the function, they were modernist, and they had quite a unique approach to designing. They kind of like to bring together the sort of style of art with industrial design. So I'm not saying that they made products that were sort of art pieces or really decorative. They tried to fuse the two together and make products that were very stylish and very fashion forward, but still very minimalist and very, very functional. So there was at this time in just after the First World War, there was a major influence on furniture design because of during wartime, most manufacturing was aimed at making things for the war. Lots of metal tubing was being used as a replacement for wood. So in lots of aircraft and lots of war sort of vehicles, they were using metal tubing, like what you can see on this chair here, as a replacement for wood, which obviously has some weaknesses depending on the structure and the grain direction, things like that. So it was starting to become much more common to see the use of this metal tubing in furniture design. So this guy, Marcel Breuer, one of the most famous Bauhaus designers, used loads of steel tubing in his sort of furniture and chair design. And one of the most famous chairs that he designed was called the Vasily chair, or a Vasily, I think it's Vasily. And this really utilized the use of industrial machinery that was used during the war, modern materials. He was also inspired by bicycle frames and things like that, but the use of this kind of tubular steel was quite revolutionary at the time and was influenced by the kind of wartime manufacturing that made a lot more use of things like steel tubing. So this really transformed the way that furniture was made from this point forward. It wasn't necessary to rely on traditional handcrafting skills. This could be made in industry by machines relatively simply. So there we go. That's the first little bit about the Bauhaus to do with the First World War and how furniture became a lot more suitable to be mass produced. So remember that one of the things about the Bauhaus is it was everyday products for everyday people, but they were stylish and incorporated some more of these kind of modern materials and techniques. Right, the second little history lesson you're going to get today is all about the Second World War. So during the Second World War, severe shortages of many goods resulted in rationing. So rationing was introduced in Britain to make sure that there was fair distribution of food, clothing, but also timber and furniture, because timber was being used, it was difficult to get timber, it couldn't be imported, lots of manufacturing plants and things were being used for the war effort. So it wasn't like you could just go and buy any type of furniture. Basically, a committee was set up to ensure that these scarce resources, so timbers and metals, were being used in the correct way and they weren't being wasted. So they were being used in an optimal way. And this scheme was called the Utility Furniture Scheme. And basically, you can see here, this is actually the kind of catalogue that if you were eligible for this scheme, you would be able to select certain bits of furniture. So they were relatively plain, quite basic, simply designed products, and they were initially only available to newly married couples and those who had lost their homes in bombing raids during the war, obviously. So these products were very simple. They did what they said on the tin. They didn't have lots of decoration, but they were good quality, they would last, and it was just to ensure that materials were not being wasted in terms of having like loads of decoration or things that weren't made to quality that would break relatively soon. So these were called utility products. So after World War II ended, if we think about modern times, fashion was being considered again, and people wanting more decorative products again. So in the aftermath of World War II, lots of products that were still being designed still looked like they were part of the utility furniture. They were basically a bit dull, kind of plain, they were still a bit basic, and people were starting to crave much more exciting design. They wanted things that had a bit more flair to them. They wanted things that had a bit more decoration. So this actually started to happen in the USA. A guy called Raymond Loewy. I actually studied Raymond Loewy on my product design degree. I found him really interesting actually. He actually designed the Shell logo. So Shell petrol station logo, that's one of his designs. And one of his first things that he designed was this, the cold spot refrigerator. So this is a fridge. And this was in like I think it was 35 maybe. This is pretty revolutionary for the time. It looks really modern. His style of design was called streamlined. So it was very curved, very stylish, almost had like go faster stripes on it, almost looked like it could be a vehicle of some kind, but a really stylish, desirable product. And this redesign, getting away from the World War II influence of things being quite basic and simple, this design by Raymond Loewy resulted in a huge increase in sales. I think it was like 4 times the usual sales. So this was all happening in the USA, and Britain started to become really worried that they would be left behind, because they were really a leader in design and manufacturing at the time. But they thought, oh no, we are going to be left behind because we are still making products influenced by the rationing and the utility products that were around during the war. So in reaction to what was happening in the USA, to make sure that they could still compete, they created a council of industrial design. And this was set up in 1944 to improve the standards of design that were happening at the time. And what they did was they created two really influential exhibitions that happened in 1946 and 1951 to really show off that Britain was still a design and manufacturing centre of the world. So they had a range of different products and furniture and things that were much more modern, and these festivals happened in London. People from all over the world travelled to see these new and exciting products, and it put Britain back on the map in terms of design, engineering and manufacturing. So at this time, as well as that, kind of moving on a little bit now, if we think about things like the 1940s and the 1950s, and even into the 1960s, things were starting to improve in terms of technology. So these were really starting to influence product design, and one of the main things that influenced it was the development of this thing called the transistor. And this meant that electrical products could be made much smaller, they could be more compact, and basically things like miniature radios and much more small and compact record players could be manufactured, which is very exciting at the time, because before that electrical products were absolutely humongous and cost a huge amount of money, but the development of the transistor made them much more available to a range of different people. And also during the 1940s and the 1950s, and into obviously going forward, polymers were starting to be discovered. So the first polymer was called Bakelite, and this is actually phenol resin or phenyl resin or whatever you call it. And polymers, both thermosetting and thermoplastics, were starting to be discovered, and moulding techniques also started to be discovered. So things like injection moulding just, opens up a huge range of different opportunities for designers. So this chair here, this one, you may recognise, I have one of these in the department. It's not an original, sadly. I have a white one, but this was designed by a guy called Vernier Panton, Italian designer, in the 1960s. And it's called the Panton chair, and you can see it's got a really organic, fluid shape to it, and it's just a completely polymer chair. And this chair here as well, which you might not think is anything special, this is called the PP chair, polypropylene chair, by Robin Day, and this is one of the most successful products ever. Because if you think in schools, you'll see chairs like this in schools all over the world, and this at the time was revolutionary, because like these kind of plastic shell seats, they couldn't be made before with more traditional manufacturing techniques. The use of injection molding actually made these available, and replacing woods and metals with polymers was quite revolutionary at the time as well. So a few more things that started to happen. Scandinavian design started to become very influential. Some of my favourite design is Scandinavian design. They brought in things like plywood furniture. Charles and Ray Eames as well were kind of around this sort of time, where they started to bring in their moulded plywood chairs that were influenced by World War II kind of technology and things as well. And this table here, the Love or Lovette table, this was one of the first with removable legs. And this guy, the guy who designed this table, actually designed the Billy bookcase for IKEA, which sold over 40 million units, and he paved the way for things called knockdown fittings, which are simplified fittings that you can use on furniture, which means they can be flat pack. So this was when IKEA really became big, and the idea that you could buy relatively reasonably priced, quite fashionable furniture that you could build yourself, but it was cheap enough to replace it when fashions changed. So back in the sort of, earlier in like the 1920s, buying a piece of furniture was probably a once in a lifetime thing. You bought it, it was passed down through generation to generation, but the kind of design of these sorts of products meant that you could quite happily and easily change the furniture in your home for quite a low cost. Now, obviously, there are some negatives to this in terms of sustainability, because it also meant that products would be discarded quite quickly and replaced when actually they could last a lot longer. So that's its own sort of issue in its own. But that's kind of how technology has developed over the years, and you can see the influence all the way through, right from World War I to World War II, to the development of different bits of technology, the transistor, polymers, injection molding, all the way through to things like flat pack and IKEA. So I hope that was useful. That is a very, very quick history lesson about some things that influenced design throughout the years, and I'll see you on the next video.